I'm just warning you now, this puzzle is going to drive you insane. This puzzle comes today from the National Solving Championships. This is an annual competition run in the UK in which a chess problem like this one is shared across various national newspapers, asking people to put through their solutions to this problem to then be able to compete in the British Solving Championships. Now, I competed in this one a few years ago. In fact, you can see one of my older videos, one of my most popular videos that maybe you've seen before, in which I actually went through a puzzle like this one. It was a mate and two that had a very nice castling solution to it. You might remember that one. And this is another one, I think even harder than that one, as there's a lot of tricky defenses from black. Now, the point of this is, if you do manage to solve it, which I'll be able to tell you how to solve it in this particular video, you can send your solutions to winton at theproblemist.org, and from there they will then send you a load of puzzles for you to compete in this. I believe that this is only open to British residents, so if you live in the United States or India, as a lot of my audience are from, you won't unfortunately be able to compete in this. Now, as I say, I did this 4 or 5 years ago, and they sent me a load of puzzles through the post. They were incredibly difficult, and I didn't go any further. I thought this was too hard, and at the time I didn't solve as much compositions as I do nowadays. I didn't feel like I was ready for the next stage. And yes, you can actually just use an engine just to solve all of them, but what's the fun in that? The whole point of this pursuit or this hobby is to try and solve really, really difficult puzzles. So that's enough of me yapping. Let's actually go through this particular puzzle. Now, the first thing I should mention is I wasn't able to find an author for this particular puzzle, so I'm only assuming that this one was created by the British Chess Problem Society. If anyone knows the author for this one, please let me know in the comments below. I did check on the Yet Another Chess Problem database, and it didn't come up with an author. Normally that's enough for me to find the person who composed this one. Okay, so have a go yourself and see if you can try and solve it. I should mention the white pawns are going down the board, the black pawns are going up the board. So if you didn't see that already, then maybe you want to have a go. Now have a go and see if you can solve it. Okay, so how would I go about solving a problem like this? Well, this one took me about 5 minutes to solve, and then probably another 20 minutes with a friend to go through some of the proofs for this one. But the first thing I like to do when I'm solving compositions like mate and twos is I look firstly at the king's flight squares. So what do I mean by the flight squares? Well, basically I first look at to see if the king has got anywhere it can go to. In this position, it's not got any flight squares, so we then know that on the second move we need to just be able to deliver some sort of check. Okay, so that's the first thing to mention. The other thing I like to also look at is my king vulnerable in this position? Because if it's vulnerable, then black may have some various defenses that just involve either like maybe going kamikaze into our position to just check the king. And well, in this position I can see that my rook is pinned by this black queen, and that's a little bit of a problem. I also need to think about the fact that this rook come to c8 with a check. The good news with this is I can see though that with this move I can take with the queen, which would be checkmate. That's good to know. However, it does also mean that if I try and play a quiet move such as a king move, which often tends to be the solution to a lot of these particular puzzles like this, let's say coming to h7 or even coming to g8, both of these can be met quite simply with a knight check on f6. And interestingly enough, if I look at king to g7, this actually fails quite nicely to a move like rook to b7. Now, I haven't actually got any good checks in this position, as if I try and check them on c8, black can simply block with rook to c7. Yes, it's going to be a checkmate in 3, but it's not going to be our desired checkmate in 2. We're not interested in checkmate in 3, it's only 2s here. And it's also interesting to note, I've highlighted here that this rook can't move out the way, so there's no other useful checks in this position. Those are some of the key things that I've looked at, so I can see that my king's a little bit vulnerable, and I need to have some sort of solution that deals with this rook to c8. So then I look at that, and then I kind of then see, okay, is there any pieces that aren't doing any useful roles here? And you can begin to see that white's pieces are all kind of doing something in this particular position. The only one that maybe I would question is this queen here. Yes, it's defending this square, but I already have a rook that's defending this already. So for me, I often would highlight this queen and have a look at that. Another piece that looks interesting here is this bishop on b3. It doesn't seem like it's doing a huge amount. It turns out in one of the solutions this will be quite important. One of the moves I've considered was maybe putting my bishop onto a2. Annoyingly though, this can just be met by a move like this. There's no mate here, and as a result, black is fine. What other moves can I try in this position? Well, again, this is where I need to be careful with which piece that I move. For example, if I move one of the knights out the way, let's say I move my knight to hit e5, which looks pretty good because I've created this nasty pin on the queen. This opens up an escape route for black. So with this knight coming off the square, I'm no longer defending the b6 square. So king to b6 is absolutely fine. There's no mate in 2 now. Going back, what other moves don't work here? I could also try the move knight to g7. This looked interesting when I first looked at this because I'm threatening to come to e6 with checkmate. The problem here is that queen takes on d4. Notice now that the knight can't come to the square because it's pinned by the queen, and this bishop takes idea that worked in some other solutions doesn't work here. So just to show you that, if let's say, I don't know, I move my king here, this and the queen takes, then this would end in checkmate because my knight is defending this and my queen's blocking over here, so this is checkmate here. So as a result, this is also a failed solution here. Let's have a look at some other moves that I also considered. I also thought about this d6 move. I thought that looked interesting as it's simply threatening to come to queen to d5 to then checkmate the black king. The good news for black is he does have a defense to this, and that is the removal of this really important knight on c4 with b takes on c4 here, and now this opens up this square. Yes, I can come in with a check here, but it doesn't matter as the king simply runs to b6. If you come with check over this way, once again the king can run, but this time to c6. So this doesn't work either. Okay, what other moves did I consider here? I think I've covered most of them. I will just go over some silly checks here as well. Now, typically with these compositions, the first move is never normally a check, and well, if you try to check in this position, you would be thwarted quite simply. Hopefully you can see why these are bad moves. I also thought about, well, what if they just brute force their way through like this? Well, against this, you can just simply play b takes on c3, and there's actually no checkmate here to be found. They could try something like queen to c6, which looks really good. The problem is with this pawn taking, the king can run over to b4, but at least shows me some interesting, gives me insights into why those moves don't work to be able to then find the best move. So having looked at all of these different things, I began to see that this queen moving seems to be the best move in this particular position. Annoyingly though, black has got some crafty defenses. So my first thought was maybe coming to d8 with the idea of taking here on e7, and I can also simultaneously deal with the rook coming to c8. The problem with this is then b takes on c4, it opens up that escape square, so this doesn't quite work. Yes, I can throw the check, but the king simply moves over here. So after that I was like, well, okay, that doesn't quite work, and that kind of fails. What if I came to a5 here instead, which deals with this potential pin? The problem with this move is with this queen going away from here, it's no longer guarding this checking square over here. So black can simply throw in a check, and he's going to delay mate by enough moves for it to no longer be a mate in 2. So we need to have a way of dealing with this threat of this whilst also dealing with this threat over here, and that's when I came across the very nice solution, queen to a6. So this is the move that wins the game. Now there are a ton of defenses here from black. In fact, there's 20 different legal moves that black can make in this position. We're going to try and cover all of them. In fact, actually I say 20, I think it's 22 actually, but I'm going to, sure someone in the comments will say you missed this particular one, whatever. Okay, so let's have a look at each of them. So first let's start with the rook moves. It should be obvious why this move doesn't work, and against the check, once again, you can take this with this. If the rook moves to b7 here, now this is a classic case of the weakness of the last move. This rook no longer defends the c6 square, so against both of these moves, we can win with queen coming to c6. So that deals with the rook moves. What else can black do? Well, what about the knights? Well, against all of the knight moves, queen to b6 is the solution here. And there's nothing else that black, there's no other move. I mean, with the knight coming away from this, it's no longer guarding this crucial b6 square to allow us to win. Now, the pawn moves were interesting because this sort of dealt with one of the issues with this. If this pawn moves away, it looked like, you know, everything was still covered, but with it moving away, it no longer defends the d6 square. So now in this case, we can play queen to d6, and if they come to e5, similar story, they just come with d6 here. Okay, so that deals with those pieces. Now let's look at some of our harder tries, and these have some of the more beautiful solutions here. So firstly, let's deal with the elephant in the room. What about b takes to c4? This seemed to have fought quite a lot of our different solutions. This time round, however, this move does not work in light of the move queen coming to here. And what's cool about this is the fact that this queen is guarding this b6 square. It's still attacking this rook. It's still attacking this king, and this was then a checkmate, and it's also doing an x-ray defense on this d5 pawn. So really, really nice solution for that one. Okay, let's have a look at the queen moves. There are loads of queen moves here, and each have some interesting solutions. Firstly, let's say if the queen just moves back to a1 or even b2. Well, this can be met with this very nice discovery checkmate, with the knight moving out the way to then deliver checkmate on this king here. And again, what's cool about this is this knight is guarding this rook here, the bishop is being guarded, and also this bishop is now guarding this d5 square. So we now see the use of why this bishop was on b3 in the first place, which is really, really cool. I like that solution a lot. Okay, so what else can black do with this queen? Well, let's just say he takes here, which seemed to work for quite a few things. In fact, there's 3 different checkmates here. You can win with either d3, rook to d3, rook to d2, or even rook to d1. Now, the reason why this all works is with this queen moving off this diagonal, there's no longer a pin on the king, so we can then uncover this nasty discovery checkmate here. This rook is also still guarding this d5 square. Very, very nice, that solution. So let's go back then to our initial position here after queen to a6. What about this move? Well, this normally would thwart a lot of our moves, and this time round this wouldn't work because this queen is no longer defending the d5 square. So importantly, now we have to find another move, and that is knight to e5 checkmate. This is so cool that every piece is working together to be able to deliver this checkmate here. I really like that solution. Okay, what else can black do? So we've looked at a number of different moves. Let's just say they take the bishop here. Once again, this fails to rook to d3. And it's important it comes to d3 because if you go to any other square, the queen can come to e3, blocking the checkmate. But by coming here, it blocks it. And you can move this rook because there's no longer this pin on this diagonal. Okay, what else is there to do with this queen? Well, I should also mention about this diagonal over here. This boat fails to knight to d2, both of these moves. So just to show you that, that's the checkmate there. What about the queen coming to d3? Well, against this fails to obviously this. But a really interesting solution is what about this move? Well, with this queen coming to this square, we can just simply take with the knight over here. I should mention though, I think, have I forgotten? Oh, I think it's this move, yes. So I don't think I've mentioned this one yet, which is the queen coming to this square, which I think has got the nicest solution, or one of the nicest ones, and that's the rook coming to d2. Really cool this, because the rook has to come to the square to block the queen from taking this bishop, but it also defends this d5 square, which would have allowed the black king to escape. Ooh, well, I think I've covered every single move. I'm sure I've missed one, but there we go. That's a solution to this qualifying puzzle. Now, if that's not put you off chess puzzle solving and think, do you know what? Maybe this isn't the hobby for me. Then you might not want to submit this solution to the British Chess Problem Society. But if you do find this really interesting and you want to compete in this particular competition, then maybe you could share this video or share your solution. I will put this study up on here that you can access and have a look for yourselves. But in any case, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope this was interesting to see how checkmate and 2 problems work. Take care, bye.